Episode 10 of Melo Movie begins from Ko Jaehyun's perspective, where he finally reveals how he was initially forced to watch movies, left home alone in the dark with only films for company. The perspective then shifts to Mubai, who had always felt her father's absence and considered herself secondary to his work. To get his attention, she began spreading rumors about her father being dead, until he actually died. She had told him to come home if he could in the middle of his overwhelming workload, and he ended up getting into a car accident. Later, Mubai and Ko Jaehyun park the car, and she asks him about his secret. We learn that, as a child, he was always afraid of being left alone. He pretended to be cheerful and bubbly to mask his fears. He also reveals that June had not wanted to live, and Ko Jaehyun had found out about it. Meanwhile, Jun asks his boss how he and Ju-ae looked as a couple, only to be told that Ju-ae had essentially been living for him. Elsewhere, Ju-ae reminisces over a small box filled with memories of Jun that she has kept. At the same time, Ko Jaehyun tries to make peace with Mubai's mother. Later that evening, Mubai and her mother talk, and Mubai realizes how much she had been undermining her mother's love. The next day, as Ko Jaehyun gives away all his videotapes, Mubai meets with Jun and Ju-ae. She tells them that she has decided to pursue the project and will try to secure funding, going against her earlier decision to accept reality as it was. Later, Jun follows Ju-ae for a while and finally realizes that he has been holding onto the past. He breaks down, reminiscing about the good times they shared. They ultimately decide to part ways for good. Meanwhile, Ko Jaehyun finds his brother's cigarettes and tries them, imagining his brother teaching him how to smoke. Sitting there, he cries and asks June to visit him in his dreams sometimes because there was so much he never knew about him. We then realize that Ko Jaehyun has been dreaming all along. Later, he joins Mubai as she sits at a bus stop. There, Ko Jaehyun reveals that he will stop watching movies because he misses real-life experiences and the moments he shares with people. We then jump to a year and 6 months later. Ko Jaehyun has once again appeared for a job interview, relaying his life story as his greatest achievement and reveling in the fact that he did well, without realizing that he actually didn't. Meanwhile, Jun has become extremely popular, with his soundtrack gaining more recognition than the movie itself. Ju-ae and Jun are no longer in contact, nor do they intend to be, but both have moved on and are doing well in their respective lives. Mubai's movie turns out to be a success, and we learn that director Ma was the investor. He even goes on to become a producer. The episode ends with Ko Jaehyun accompanying Mubai on her set, where their love story culminates in a beautiful kiss. This was a heartwarming and satisfying finale, as all the characters undergo significant growth and the story reaches a hopeful conclusion. Melo Movie reminds us what hope feels like. Since this show is more character-driven than narrative-driven, each character struggles with their own demons. However, because it is ultimately a life-affirming story, the direction ensures that heavy themes, such as grief, the loss of a loved one, the end of a relationship, and losing oneself, do not overshadow the show's uplifting essence. This delicate balance is what makes Melo Movie beautiful, despite its slight flaws. This episode wraps up the character arcs beautifully. We finally understand that Ko Jaehyun's attachment to films was his way of coping with his deep-seated fear of abandonment, especially after the traumatic loss of his parents at a young age. Now that he has Mubai and his friends by his side, he no longer needs to hide behind the comfort of fiction. Mubai, too, resolves her trauma regarding her father's death and her lingering guilt. She comes to recognize that she had always been deeply loved by her mother, who had been by her side all along. As for Jun and Ju-ae, both find their own paths while supporting each other from a distance. Even director Ma resolves his existential crisis about his future as a director and transitions into becoming a producer. Overall, this was an incredibly satisfying and heartfelt finale.